In this conversation, we're talking about diabetes prevention. And we know if you have cancer, for example, what a lot of our community is dealing with cancer or wanting to prevent cancer, we know that if you have cancer, your risk for diabetes goes up exponentially.
Right.
Same thing if you have other chronic diseases, or if you're overweight or obese or dealing with heart disease or neurodegenerative disease, Alzheimer's, all of these things, any one of these diseases increases your risk for a diabetic, for a diagnosis of diabetes. Right, especially type 2 diabetes, for example, or pre-diabetes. What I recommend everyone do, and actually I learned this from you guys, from you and Cyrus, is go test your fasting blood glucose in the morning.
Yes.
And go do at least 3 days in a row and see where you're at. If you don't have a diabetes diagnosis, you can buy a little, what's the name of it?
Blood glucose meter.
Blood glucose meter. You can buy it on Amazon for like $20, whatever.
Yes.
Test it in the morning, and you should definitely be below 100, right?
Correct.
I think when I tested mine 3 days in a row, I think I averaged between 60 and 80, if I remember, somewhere between 40 and 80, somewhere in there. It was around the 50 number. And I just wanted to see. It was like, okay, what is it? Let me go see. I want to make sure that what I'm eating and how I'm eating is actually not causing insulin resistance.
50 is pretty low. I would expect you to be somewhere around between like 70 and 90.
Okay, but so maybe it was.
There's also got to be
tested was a few months ago. I remember like the 80, somewhere between like 60 and 80 in there. So maybe it was closer to 80. It was right somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's great. And I couldn't agree more. Like, there's nothing wrong with gathering some data. Like, just to understand what's going on. And that's the one thing we love about diabetes, and what we do is it's very objective. It's a very objective condition. We can monitor it on a very regular basis. And as long as you're using the same meter, that's going to be beneficial, because there is a little bit of margin of error on these meters. And I like what you're saying here, Nathan, with at least do 3 days in a row, so you can kind of get an average. You don't want to have like some anomaly and then make some decision like, oh, wow, I need to change something. Well, you might not. Like, let's get more data. So it's a very objective condition. And that's part of actually what makes diabetes so confusing, because it's one of the few conditions you can self-monitor at home on a meal by meal basis. If you have, let's say you got kidney disease, okay? Let's say you have cancer, okay? You can't eat one meal and then test yourself some at-home device and be like, wow, did I get better or worse with my cancer? You're not sure. Like, this takes time. There's no like objective data right then and there. But for diabetes, you can test your blood glucose. You can test it 1 hour after a meal. You can test it 2 hours. You can see the elevation. You can see how long it takes to come back down into range. And so this is part of the reason why a low carbohydrate approach has become so popular and so common, because in the short term, it absolutely will lower your blood glucose readings, no question. But what you're doing is you're trading some shorter blood glucose readings in the short term, some lower blood glucose readings in the short term, for insulin sensitivity, which you're going to want for your long-term success.
So and you're talking about something like the ketogenic diet, low carbohydrate, high fat. You'll see some good readings at first, and then
absolutely.
And then what happens?
Okay, and then over time, what happens is, number one, oftentimes people hit a plateau. They find it very hard to maintain. And then the moment you try and eat some carbohydrate-rich foods, your blood glucose spikes like crazy, because you've actually eaten your blood glucose, and your insulin levels will spike at that case. Because you've eaten yourself into a state of insulin resistance. So we have to take a step back and really understand what is the root cause of insulin resistance. Okay, the root cause is excess dietary fat stored in muscle and liver tissue. Now, there are other causes, okay? So heme iron is a problem when it comes to insulin resistance. Advanced glycation end products are a problem when it comes to insulin resistance. Excess sodium, nitrates and nitrites. Like, there are problematic substances, and mainly a lot of them are causing inflammation, which prevent insulin from working properly. But there is nothing more problematic than excess dietary fat. First off, trans fat, then saturated fat, and then even some of the polyunsaturated fats you'll find in whole plant foods. You can't just go to town on high fat foods if you're trying to maximize your insulin sensitivity. And so our approach and what we do and how we help people is very much designed for people who are in a disease state already. Like they've already developed prediabetes. That is a disease state. Like, don't be confused by the name. Okay. That is a problem and it has to be addressed. Okay. Type 2 diabetes, like we've already gone past prediabetes. Like, we got to do something about this. Okay. And most people who come in with us with type 1, type 1.5, we're objectively displaying insulin resistance by the very nature of how much insulin they have to inject to maintain a relatively healthy A1C. So even if you're type 1, you're injecting a lot of insulin, your A1C is great, you're still having insulin resistance at the underlying level there. And the number one cause of death for people living with all forms of diabetes is heart disease. So we can't just think, oh, wow, like all I have to do is focus on my blood glucose readings. All I have to do is make sure my A1C is good. That is not going to result in you having, the maximum high quality lifestyle that you will be able to have when following a low fat, plant-based whole food diet.